Go ahead and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Now, we'll be turning several other places, and I'll try and warn you ahead of time, but 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And we've been kind of continuing a series that is designed to show us how to raise faithful kids. And so about a year ago, we did a topic of parenting, and we talked about parenting. And this is not exactly parenting, because we're not just dealing with parents. We're dealing with everyone in the church who is an adult member of the church, and the responsibility that we have in the lives of the children that God has brought to this church, and how to raise children that are going to be full of faith so they will be faithful. We talked about that the first week, and then last Sunday I gave a word directly to the youth because they are able to be responsible. And then this Sunday we need to look at another topic, and this is, I won't say it's politically incorrect, it's just unpopular. It's one that we don't like to look at, but we've got to carve out a niche in our knowledge to discuss how to avoid the mindless pursuit of happiness this holiday and how to raise disciplined kids. Because every great achiever has one common denominator, and that is that they have a sense of discipline about their life. So in the text that we're challenged to teach today, here in 1 Corinthians 9, Paul points out how every athlete exercises discipline. Well, put it this way, if they don't, they're not in the NBA anymore, okay? So if they didn't, then they're not still in the NBA. So Paul discovered, and this is our thesis today, the key to being discipled is the achievement of spiritual discipline. You'll never be discipled if you have no spiritual discipline. Why? Because you'll quit before lesson 4. You won't even get through the whole process. You won't go through what we give you in those 16 topics that could also bring a shower blessing to your life. You won't go through that. You will not have the discipline involved to get to the end of something that is going to take you, turn you around, and start changing your entire life from the inside out. So too often we are people that we want health while we drink our 40s. And smoke our menthols, and we want wealth without work, and we want success without sacrifice. We want spirituality without any struggle. So we want power without prayer. We want friendship without fellowship. We want blessings without burdens. We want roses without thorns, and we want a crown but no cross. And yet the Bible lets us know discipline is the key to discipleship. And I know that's not a popular topic in our time, because the practical principles of prayer, daily quiet time in your Bible, in other words, in short, perseverance in the Word of God, patience in the worship of God, and productivity in the work of God, those are not popular teachings today. And if this year's MTV VMA Awards proved anything at all to the 10.1 million people who were viewing, it is that both our public and our personal lives are plagued by the mindless pursuit of personal pleasure. I mean, Gaga was art pop artistic, and Miley Cyrus was clearly demonic. Don't tell me you missed the horns on her head. Don't tell me you missed that. I mean, you could have missed that, I guess, looking at all the other stuff, but you shouldn't have missed that. And it all ends up being exactly what our founding documents guarantee. Some people say they're sacred. I don't know. I'm not so sure. I think I got one sacred document. That's the Bible. But some people, because they guarantee liberty to use your life for the mindless pursuit of happiness. Now contrast that with the 50-year celebration of the March on Washington. So in one event, you have consequences that are not contemplated and outcomes that are not considered, where we are strictly driven by how things appear and how we feel. And if it's fun, we want to find it. And if it's not, we want to forget it. And anything that appears too strenuous, laborious, or unpleasant is left out of the discussion. We just want to be entertained. And then 3 days later, you've got a reminder of the sacrifice made, not just by those on the mole that day in 1963, but those who were martyrs in that movement. But since you're not yet feeling me like I need you to, can I give you an experiential exegesis of the 3 facts of life? Can I just explore your experience? For an explanation for why more people were interested in the mindless VMAs than the meaningful reminder of the march. Because at the bottom line, we all need a strong dose of discipline from these 3 facts of life. So notice if you will. First off, number one, success takes time. You see somebody and they're in a lot of glory, you don't understand there's a story behind that glory. And they didn't just get there overnight. But then second, on the other hand, this is number two, you don't have time for everything. It takes time and you don't have time for everything. You don't have time for every vain conversation. You don't have time for every silly idea. You don't have time to take up moments of your life with stuff that isn't going anywhere and ultimately does not matter. So that means third, be selective and schedule. Why? Because if you do not decide how you're going to spend your time, the devil and the world are going to decide for you. Plato said the first and best victory in life is to conquer yourself. The Apostle Paul is clear, Romans 6, 7, and 8, that the process of the Christian life is a battle to conquer sin, self, and Satan. And guess what, Kimosabe? All three are conquered by the cross. So if you're here and you're not asleep, I know just what you're saying. Look, Alan, I don't know who told you I was going to be here today, but I'm going to guess it was any number of people over the last month who have accused me of being lazy, undisciplined, or just generally a slob. And had I known that they told you I was going to show up, I would have avoided this place like Superman avoids kryptonite. I mean, I can't believe that I'm in here in such a good, large group of people on a Sunday when it was raining so bad outside. And most Baptist churches, it takes us, 1,500 gallons of water to get you in the church, but only 15 drops of rain to keep you away. So I can't believe who's here, but because, Alan, you do know I'm allergic to work. And work and discipline are almost the same thing. So I hear what you're saying. That some people would say, if the shoe fits, wear it, in terms of what you're saying. But I say, if the shoe fits, find a dress and purse, or a wallet and a watch to go with it. So don't let me leave here till you tell me, what must I do to know how to raise kids who want the discipline that we all need to have? And I'd be glad to help you out. Give me a minute to unpack this passage. We'll clothe ourselves with His truth, get our healing. Head out of here ready to bring somebody with you next Sunday to see how to raise spiritual kids. So discipline is what we need to escape the mindless pursuit of happiness. It is what we should want in order to raise amazing kids. So I'm going to start with number one, what it is. Look at verse 24. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain. So let me hit you first with its definition. This is letter A. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is the process by which you learn a way of life. It's the process by which you learn a lifestyle. So the two words discipline and disciple come from the same etymological root. A disciple is a learner. It is someone who learns a trade or a craft from a master craftsman. And that caliber of learning requires a relationship between the master who knows the discipline and the student as his disciple. And within that relationship, the master leads the student through the discipline until the disciple can imitate, emulate, and live life just like the master lives it. So at its very core, discipline means to train or instruct. Discipline is setting the boundaries by which you will live. Now, I know you don't believe me, so let me read it to you. In Ephesians 6, verse 4, I think this verse is on your handout. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in two things, the nurture, but then number two, the admonition of the Lord. Let the whole church say admonition. Admonition is teaching and instruction. But let me hit you with Shelby's sidewalk definition, okay? Because admonition means training by word of truth and also giving whatever is needed to motivate and take that training to heart. So admonition is really the biblical method of discipline. So turn now to Hebrews chapter 12. Keep your finger 1 Corinthians 9, but turn to Hebrews 12, because when a craftsman trains an apprentice, everything is done with the purpose of making that apprentice also into a craftsman and turning that student into a master himself. So raising disciplined kids means that the parent, who is the master or should be the master at living life, is trying to teach the child that way of life. Now, a lot of parents today are not the masters of their own life. that they should be. Therefore, God brings kids into this church so adults who are learning and have learned to master something about life can pass something on to those kids. And biblical discipline not only has a definition, but second, this is letter B, it has a purpose. And that purpose is to train in righteousness. Notice Hebrews 12, verse 9 says, "Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? For they verily for a few days chastened." Let the whole church say chastened. Okay, that word chasten means the rearing of a child by discipline, or by training and correction. So the purpose of training, it says here in verse 10, "They chastened us after their own pleasure, but He, God, for our profit, that we might be partakers of His holiness." So the purpose is to produce righteousness, to take part of His holiness and produce righteousness. And there will be divine interruptions, divine interventions. There will be divine providences. But by and large, your blessings, your miracle, your deliverance is going to come on the tail end of some perfected process of discipline. Now, that's not what the TV preachers tell you, which is why I don't drive a Mercedes. But if I pray for strong faith, I got to get off my knees and get in my Bible. If I pray for financial blessing, I got to get off my knees, find a job, build a budget, pay my tithe, and discipline my desires. I asked God for strength, He gave me struggles. I asked God for wisdom, He gave me problems. I asked God for courage, so He gave me dangers. I asked Him for patience, so He forced me to wait. I asked God for favor, so He gave me opportunities. I asked God for love, so He gave me troubled people to help. I received nothing I wanted. I got everything I needed. I am truly blessed. Now that we know what it is, and we understand something of what it does, but where should we work? What should we work on to develop discipline? Because whatever we want to see in kids, go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, whatever we want to see in children first starts with us. So watch, verse 25, "And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible." So in the biblical concept of community, it takes a church. Because every adult has a responsibility for shaping every child. Why? Because God's blessing is not just about you in this generation. God's blessing is about our generation bringing along the next generation to glorify God with the legacy we leave them. So what should we do? This is number 3. This is how it is done. Look at verse 26. Paul says, "I therefore so run, not as uncertainly." I don't do it timidly, half-heartedly, not knowing what I'm about. So fight I, not as one that beateth the air. If we're going to make discipline work in our lives and the lives of our kids, there are 4 things that I would give you. First, letter A, master your moods. Let the whole church say moods. Because disciplined people are willing to do what undisciplined people are too moody to do. That means you got to get a handle on your attitude. Because a lot of times, it ain't your situation, baby Baba, it's you. It is not your circumstances, it is you. When you walked in, you had an attitude. And attitudes will mess you over because attitudes work deceptively, especially for the people who have them. Because what happens is, you'll cop an attitude, and then the attitude that you have tells you you don't have an attitude. So here's our first point for study. We cannot teach our children to master their moods if we don't have a handle on our own feelings and emotions. So look at Proverbs 25. Proverbs 25, let's take a pop quiz. We're going to be several times in Proverbs, so just keep a finger there along with 1 Corinthians. Are you a moody person? Do you live by your emotions? When you get up, is it time to rise and whine? What percentage of your decisions do you make because you feel like it? How highly do you give allegiance to duty as a virtue? Well, let me take you another further. Do you use your personality or your upbringing or your genetics or your past wounds as an excuse to maintain a bad attitude? See, just look at your neighbor and say ouch, because I know you can't say amen. Just say ouch. See, Proverbs 25, verse 28. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that's broken down without walls. You are vulnerable to invasion, to everybody, to people taking stuff from you. Here's our second point for study. Without discipline to duty, we are all at the mercy of our moods and we are victimized by our feelings. You are defenseless if you do not master your moods. Now let me open a window on that word, because a mother went into the bedroom to wake her son up for church, and she said, "Son, it's time to get ready to go to church." And he said, "Mom, I'm not going because I don't feel like it." She said, "Boy, you better get up and not make us late." He said, "Mom, I really don't feel like it. I don't want to go." She said, "Why?" He said, "I'll give you 2 good reasons. Because I don't like the people there, and the people there hate me." His mama said, "You got to get up and go anyway." He said, "Why?" She said, "I'll give you 2 good reasons. Because number 1, you're 34 years old. Number 2, you're pastor of the church." So turn to Proverbs 13. Turn to Proverbs 13. Did you ever do something you didn't really feel like doing? Have you ever had to encourage your kids to do something they did not feel like doing? And this is imperative to master, because we will never be godly at the level that God intends for us if we do things only when we feel like it. We will never be the church God intends for us to be if we only do the things that are comfortable, easy, and the things we feel like. Most of the great things done are done by people who did not feel like doing them. Just ask Serena Williams this year. In her 30s now, back pain, back spasms, arthritis, all sorts of stuff. Discipline is doing what you will and not just what you feel. So in order to raise disciplined kids, we got to help them manage their moods. And then second, this is letter B. Watch your words. Let the whole church say words. You better watch it. Proverbs 13:3. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life. But he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. So guard your tongue to protect your life. Turn to chapter 21 of Proverbs, because if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong way, you can end up in deep doo-doo. And not just physically, because Proverbs 21 verse 23 says, "Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keeps, guards, protects his soul from troubles." You keep yourself from stress, anxiety, and frustration. Now look at James 1, because an unrestrained tongue is a sign of immaturity. And I can't tell you how many people that I've seen hung by their own tongue. Now let me open a window on that word, because when I watched the movie Bambi, it taught me something. If you can't say anything good, all right, watch James 1:26. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, he deceiveth his own heart. This man's religion's vain. If you don't watch your words, you just seem to be spiritual, but you are self-deceived about your true spirituality. If your faith cannot control your tongue, it must not be worth having. So to raise a disciplined child, master your moods, watch your words, and then third, so that you can restrain your reactions. Let the whole church say restraint. Look at verse 27 of 1 Corinthians 9. Paul says, "But I keep under my body, and I bring it into subjection, lest that by any means when I preach to others, I myself should be a castaway." Now that is different than what our kids learn watching MTV. That is different than what they learn watching music videos. That is different than what they learn watching wannabe gangsters who really are living in the suburbs, driving hoopties and shopping at Hy-Vee. They don't even know what it is to be a thug and parade that, yet they parade that image before our youth, trying to get them to buy into a nowhere, do-nothing life. Preach, Alan. This is different than the image on reality TV, which is designed to work with the negative elements of our society to feed a cradle-to-prison pipeline constructed in order to profit from the pain of the poor and the minorities. Why? Because in those portrayals, kids are encouraged not to restrain themselves. They're told that by letting themselves go, it's the only way to be true to themselves. Like truth, in the context of evil, is some kind of virtue. Listen, I'd rather be a punk who grows up godly than be a thug who dies young and goes to hell. Hello, somebody. Turn to Proverbs 19. Turn to Proverbs chapter 19, because you can mock that word all you want. But just go home, turn the burner on high, stick your hand on the stove, and see how much fun you have partying in hell. All I'm trying to say is, in the end, who really got punked? So restrain your reactions, because Proverbs 19 verse 11 says, the discretion of a man deferreth his anger, and it is his glory to pass over a transgression. Control your temper and ignore an offense, why don't you? Why? Because some stuff is not worth your getting offended. And the more stuff that is not worth your getting offended, the more stuff you choose to simply ignore as being beneath you, the more mature that you are. Because it is only the immature that get offended at the small stuff. So when somebody plucks your last good nerve, how do you handle it? Did you restrain your reactions, or is it easy for you to fly off the handle? A person who cannot disagree with you without disliking you, or a person who cannot discuss a hot subject with you without getting hot with you, they have a discipline problem. They got to push people or cuss people because they don't agree with people. They've got an undisciplined mind and emotion. So the issue is discipline. How much does it take to tick you off? George Washington Carver said something good, I think, in light of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. He said, I would permit no man, no matter what his color might be, to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him. Nobody ought to have that much power over you. But what it takes to defend yourself against that is discipline. So go to 2 Timothy 4 and watch. Whenever you say to someone, you made me mad, what you're really saying is, I have no discipline over my own emotions, and I have allowed you to be in control of my life. I have given up me to you, and you are controlling my mood and my attitude. And once people discover how to push your buttons and yank your chain, you are going to be one button, push, chain, yank person. And our kids learn that at an early age from us. They learn. They may not process it this way in their mind, but they know it's true. Oh, I may be small, but if I can make mama mad, guess who's really running this show? Guess who's really running this town? It ain't the organist. It's the terrorist. Okay, so here's the advice the Bible gives. As Paul wrote to a younger person he was training, 2 Timothy 4, verse 5. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. Watch in all things. Here's our third point for study. Disciplined people choose to act rather than react so that they won't be controlled by circumstances. Now look at Proverbs 16. Act in love so you won't be controlled by anger. Act in endurance so you won't be controlled by impatience. Act with a soul consciousness and evangelistic outlook so you won't be controlled by selfishness, and the flesh. That is the discipline it takes to fully prove who you really are in Christ. Now, Proverbs 16 verse 32 says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He that ruleth his spirit is better than he that taketh the city. But patience often trumps raw power. If you don't believe the Bible, just ask the Vietnamese. Ask the Taliban. Ask Al-Qaeda. Patience often trumps raw power. So if you want to raise disciplined kids, you got to master your moods, watch your words. You got to restrain your reactions so that you can teach them and train them to do likewise. But can I take you another further? This is fourth thing, letter D. Stick to a schedule. Now turn to Ephesians 5. Your time is your life. If you waste your time, you waste your life. And you know what? You can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. So do not live accidentally or incidentally. You say, Alan, how do I do that? You're asking good questions today. Look at Ephesians 5, verse 15 and 16. Into verse 15, beginning verse 16. See then that ye walk circumspectly, that's watch. Watch thou in all things, watch all around, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, specifically because the days are evil. Time management is a learned talent. People who are late all the time have trained themselves to be so. How do you teach kids to manage time? Here are 5 keys to training kids in time management. Number 1, set a good example. Because whether you recognize it or not, your example is training your children. Second, start out early. Plan to be there before you need to arrive there. Okay, leave the house in time to get there. Okay, get in the car before the time event is scheduled to start. All right, third, buy them their own calendar and watch. Why? Because they need to be aware where they are at in life and in time, and they need to tell time using their own watch so they do not have to rely on somebody outside of them in order to be disciplined. Fourth, color-coded to-do list. That'll help them understand to establish priorities. And fifth, resist the temptation to overbook either yourself or them. Kids can't be in anything. You cannot be in everything. You know, you can't just do everything, a single thing that's out there. Be faithful. Don't trifle. Choose for yourself and your children to model the spiritually important things. Look at Proverbs 21. How do we escape the mindless pursuit of happiness? Here's number 5, letter E. Manage your money. And I know these things I'm listing for you, these 5 things tend to get harder as they go along. But Proverbs 21 verse 20 says, there's a treasure to be desired in oil. Now oil is a treasure today. Did you see how gas prices went up? And oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up in a wise person's house. They are saving for the future. The foolish person spends all they make as soon as they make it. And you will never be disciplined until you get a handle on your money and learn to live on a margin. Live with some margin in your life. See, the typical American family lives from paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because we never learn the discipline of delayed gratification. We want everything right when we think of it. I mean, right when we see the commercial, we want it. So we mortgage our future to MasterCard. We get addicted to debt. And it's not sometimes that we don't manage our money. We don't manage our credit. So look at Proverbs 22. Proverbs chapter 22. Discipline requires delayed gratification, because this is our 4th point for study. You will never get out anything without paying for it. So the only question is, do you pay less with cash, paying all at once, or pay more with credit, paying over time? Because whenever you delay payment, instead of delaying gratification, you got to pay somebody else interest. Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Somebody better hear me up in here. Because if it were up to me, every couple would elope. Wait, hear me out. Every couple would elope. They would save their money and elope, and then the longer they stayed together, the bigger reception they got. See, our problem is we pay for the party up front. No, baby Baba, you shouldn't have a party for getting together. You ought to have a party for staying together. See, that's called delayed gratification. Oh, you're sitting at home watching Real Wives of Wyandotte County, so you don't even count. You're watching all that trash and your kid is failing math. What is wrong with you? Preach, Alan. Truth will set you free. Every 4-year-old knows where money comes from, the ATM. And everybody's been, sitting in line at the ATM one time and watched the person in front of you cuss that machine out. Because they put their card in, they tried to get money out, but they did not have enough money in. So you can't have it all, but you and your children can be blessed if you just institute discipline. So in the final analysis, before we raise up out of here, can I give you the ABCs of raising disciplined kids? Turn to Philippians 2. The ABCs, because first, this is letter A. We have to admit we need help from God. Let the whole church say, admit it. We all need help, especially with our children. I need your prayer support. If my kids were younger and you saw my kids asking up, you ought to just say to them, I'm going to tell your parent. I mean, that's all people had to do with me was say, I'm going to tell your mama, because that meant something back in the day. Letter B, believe God will help you. And look at Philippians 2:13. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Don't miss those two parts, because first, God will give you the will to do it, and then second, he'll give you the power to do it. Because whatever God asks you to do, he will give you the ability to do, but you have to believe that God will help you. Why? Because your expectation determines what response you give, and you need to give a faith response to the challenges of your life. After all, when the meteorologist comes on, you act on his expectation that he sets, and he's wrong half the time. Look at 2 Timothy 1. Manly Beasley, the late evangelist Manly Beasley, always gave us a great definition of faith. Faith is acting like it's so when it's not so, in order for it to be so, because God says it's so. So third, in the final analysis, this is letter C. Claim the promise of God. Psychologists call this the principle of positive reinforcement. So instead of focusing on the negative thing you're afraid is going to happen, focus on the positive thing you want to happen. Why? Because we move toward what we focus on. Okay, watch. Here in 2 Timothy 1, Paul was able to tell the next gen, Timothy, verse 7, for God hath not given us the spirit of fear. Wait, you don't understand. Timothy, I'm in jail. This time I ain't getting out. I have a death sentence over me. I will be executed. God has not given me the spirit of fear, because he's replaced it with a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. That was in the last letter he wrote, written from a Roman prison, knowing he wasn't going to get out except by execution. And he says, get out of the fearful spirit and discipline your attitude to focus on power, love, and sound thinking. In conclusion, you say, Alan, are there any rewards to discipline? Well, you're asking good questions today, because there's some incredible rewards. Practice financial discipline, you've got good cash flow and great credit. Practice moral discipline, you have a clear conscience, strong self-esteem, no fear of skeletons falling out of your closet or rocks under your rug tripping people up. Practice spiritual discipline, you get connected to God, blessed by God, favored by God, used by God, kept by God, led by God, lifted by God, and in the end, welcomed by God. May God give us all the power to raise disciplined kids. Every head bowed, every eye closed, every Christian, please pray.